tells him that he needed to pay fees to enter the dungeon even if registering was free. Even for a 1-star dungeon, the entrance fee was in thousands of won. But Woojin has no money and he cannot put the burden for it on his mother, so he can only ask one person for another loan, Yeeman. The next day, Woojin goes to the association to register as an awakened. He fills the paperwork and moves to the assessment chamber so that his abilities can be tested and ranked. It is a circular room with most of its wall made of reinforced glass. Woojin was in the room and the people from the association were watching him through the glass. All the officials looking at him are shocked when they see his black aura as they had never seen it before. There is a dead animal in front of him and Woojin sacrifices it to summon a skeleton. The Necromancer was a rare class and the people assessing Woojin right now had never seen one in person. They tell him that his class was a rare one, but now he had to be tested for his strength. It was standard procedure for the strength of a summoner to be measured by the strength of his summon, and this would decide his rank. A projector creates a holographic image of a goblin and Woojin is amazed to see it. The official tells him to attack the holograph using only his skeleton, and Woojin does that. But it turns out that he is only an F rank since his skeleton was quite weak, and Woojin does not even know that it was the lowest rank. He learns it when he asks the officer what it meant. But even after he learns that he was ranked as the weakest category of awakened, Woojin is not disappointed. He simply does not care. The officer also tells him that even though he was only an F rank, his ability was unique and most parties would want him to join them. But Woojin is happy that he can join a dungeon finally. Woojin takes the help of the app and reaches a dungeon. Its rating is 2-star and he thinks it would be good enough to start. There are already many people at the entrance and most of them seem to be part of a group. Woojin is also invited by the leader of one such group. He is Bidasu, an E-rank veteran miner. He tells Woojin that their team had 7 members and they had space for just one more. But Woojin initially rejects his offer saying that he would go alone. Dasu explains to him that it would be a waste of his entrance fee to go alone. He could only enter the dungeon for a limited time and there was a limit how much he could mine in that time. But then Dasu learns that Woojin was only an F-rank awakened who had registered just 2 hours ago. That meant he was a beginner who knew nothing and had come to a dungeon just because he wanted to. He tells Woojin that since this was his first time in a dungeon, it would be the best way for him to join a team. That way he could learn everything and get the most out of his money. Woojin thinks that it was a fair deal and decides to join the team. Dasu tells him that the hourly fee to enter the dungeon was for a maximum of 8 people. That meant the 800,000 won that were to be paid to enter the dungeon for 1 hour could be divided by the team. Otherwise, it would be too expensive for one person to make a profit from the dungeon. And it was also much more efficient because mining bloodstones also took some time. Overall, even if Woojin thought he wanted to go to dungeons alone after this, it would be not bad to go with a party the first time to get some experience. While waiting for his party's turn, Woojin meets another newbie like him named Hong Songgu. He was also an F-rank awakened and used fireball to attack monsters. Songgu is quite nervous and asks Woojin if he was not getting chills. But Woojin replies that a man should be strong even if he is afraid, and Songgu is impressed by his confidence and hard-boiled attitude. Woojin learns that Songgu was also scouted into this party by Dasu. He had awakened 2 months ago and then decided to quit school to work as a full-time dungeon miner. As they are waiting, the team that went in the dungeon earlier comes out and they are injured. Some accident had happened and they could not keep themselves safe. A hobgoblin had appeared in the dungeon and the people outside could not believe it. A quarrel starts between different groups about what was possible, and not but Dasu tells his group that quarreling like those people was useless. It was foolish to be certain about a dungeon as it could often surprise visitors. Sometimes the monsters that were not previously encountered and therefore not on the list could be found in the dungeon. This time it was a hobgoblin, but there was no need to worry about that. A hobgoblin was a 2-star monster and with a good teamwork they could defeat it without any losses. It was their turn now and the group goes in the dungeon and immediately starts fighting the monsters. Songgu uses his fireball attack and Dasu uses his skill combustion that burns the eyes of the goblins. It seems to be much easier than Woojin had hoped for and the group is relaxed after clearing the first wave. He had also invested the rest of his stat points in his skeletons and they had become faster and stronger. Other awakened are quite impressed by the unique abilities of Woojin. Dasu is mining the bloodstones from the dead bodies of the goblins and says that the mining rate in 2-star dungeons was much better than that in a 1-star dungeon. He could get 200,000 won for each stone and he gets greedy thinking about the money. The group clears the dungeon and reaches the final floor where the boss would be waiting for them. They enter and find that the hobgoblin was waiting for the invaders along with his goblin comrades. Dasu says that they were going to go with the normal formation, but Woojin has his doubts about that. He He asks him should they not be more careful when dealing with the hobgoblin, but Dasu says that he had already prepared for that. He had memorized the attack pattern of the hobgoblin. It used magic and they could block that using the shield abilities of a member, and then in the time the hobgoblin recharged, they would attack him together and kill him. Seeing that Dasu was the leader and he had a plan, Woojin does not push, thinking that it was not his place to lead the team. Their plan gets initial success as the shield user is able to block the lightning magic used by the hobgoblin, and the other fighters attack the goblins. Woojin remembers that he faced hobgoblins when he was on Alphen. They were not particularly strong most of the times, but they were not easy to deal with. What separated them from goblins was their higher intelligence that allowed them to use magic spells. But magic was not their best weapon, neither was their physical strength. The greatest danger they posed was their intelligence that allowed them to command other goblins. And it was about to happen in this dungeon as well. The goblins were united and they were using improvised weapons. One of the goblins shoots a poison dart at the awakened who was using the shield and he dies immediately. Woojin realizes that the team was in dire condition as the goblins now had a commander. But Dasu realizes it too, and instead of pushing ahead, he decides to run away. He screams at his party to run away immediately and all of them are scared after losing the cornerstone of their plan. But Songu is still stunned by what just happened and cannot respond to the call to run. He was charging his fireball and Dasu tells him to stop it and run away right now. They could not save their teammate who had died and decide to leave his body there. But as they are running away from the monsters, the party does not take measures to protect their back. The hobgoblin uses his lightning magic spell and it hits Songu and he falls on the ground. No one stops to help him and run away. Songu is lying on the ground surrounded by the goblins who are getting close to finish him. Woojin was hiding while all of this was happening and waiting for his chance. Now that no one else is around to see his real skills, he decides to hunt all the goblins. He summons his weapon from the item box and also summons his skeleton army to face against the goblins. But he knows that it was not easy to fight goblins when they had a commander leading them. That is why he does not charge head-on and decides to follow a strategy. He orders his skeleton soldiers to block the goblins from getting close to him, and in the meantime, he would take care of the leader. He jumps up as the hobgoblin starts to chant his spell and stabs it to death before it can cast the spell. Woojin has leveled up to level 6 and he feels happy. It was better to work alone after all. But then he hears the groans of Songu, who was luckily still alive. He asks Woojin to save him and Woojin shamelessly asks him what would he get in return. Songu strains himself and says that he would not tell anyone his secret that he was a D rank awakened since he had killed a hobgoblin by himself. Songu begins working alongside Woojin after he saves him and heals him, and he mines the bloodstones of the monsters Woojin killed. He thinks that the man who just killed all the goblins can't be an F rank. Considering that he killed a hobgoblin and all other goblins alone, he should at least be a D rank. Only D rank awakened were known to be able to clear 2-star dungeons on their own. And adding to that his unique skill of necromancy and his ability to detect bloodstones and using the dead bodies of the goblins to heal others were exceptional. He could very easily be a C rank awakened as he had registered only 3 hours ago. But what was even more crazy was that Woojin seemed to be obsessed with money. He asks Songu how much would all the bloodstones they gathered fetch and gets happy on learning that they were worth at least 8 million won. He tells Songu that all of these were his and Songu agrees readily. He is amazed by how greedy Woojin was. When he said that he would keep his secret in exchange of saving his life, Woojin said he does not care about that. He showed a victory sign to Songu, saying that this much would be enough. Songu cannot understand what Woojin means until he explains it to him clearly. Woojin wants Songu to give him 2 million won for saving his life. Seeing that it was not a bad price and Woojin had really saved his life, he had agreed to give him the money. With the dungeon cleared, Woojin locates the return stone and both of them come out to the safe zone using it. But as they are walking to the exit, Woojin stops Songu as he senses slight bloodlust coming. Since all the goblins were slain, it could only come from humans. He tells Songu that someone was planning to ambush them and it was not the monsters. He calls out the people from the party that were hiding upstairs to come out. They come out and they look very nervous. Dasu asks Woojin if they had really cleared the dungeon and killed all the monsters. Woojin does not immediately reply to them and warns Songu that he should be alert now. Then he turns to Dasu and asks them why had they come back. They had run away earlier and abandoned their teammates, so what reason did they have to come back now? They should have waited in front of the barrier and not here. Dasu is taken aback by these words and asks Woojin not to be so mean. They were all members of a team and they should understand each other's motivations. He says that they had made a strategic retreat on being overpowered by the goblins and now wanted to come back and finish their job. but by the time they returned everything was already over. Woojin thinks that he does not mean what he says. Dasu is looking at the bag on his shoulder containing all the bloodstones. He asks them if they wanted this and scatters the bloodstones on the ground. He tells Dasu and others that if they wanted it so badly, they should go ahead and try picking them. But his aura is intimidating and no one dares to step ahead. Dasu says that it was all a misunderstanding. They were not here to betray them and take the loot. He says that Woojin was obviously stronger than them as he could kill the hobgoblin and they could not. He apologizes for running away without them earlier, but he had a good reason for it. His life was on the line and he could not think of anything but to save it. He asks Woojin to believe him and says that they were here only to get back the return stone and run away. Woojin thinks that he might be overthinking about this. Maybe the ambush was meant for monsters and not for them. He had lived in Alphen for too long and maybe he was paranoid because of how things were there. But while he is thinking of this, his eyes start burning. It was the combustion skill used by Dasu. Dasu screams at his companions to kill the two men and an arrow hits Songu's shoulder. Dasu laughs at Woojin and says that he was right. They were here to kill them and take the bloodstones. But he should know it that all the awakened were the same. As he says that, he runs to Woojin and stabs him with a dagger. Meanwhile, in another dungeon, the main team of H Warring Guild has come out after killing all the monsters. Their leader Leonie is changing out of her armor into normal clothes when she gets a call. It was about the case from a few days ago when someone had entered their dungeon without authorization. She is informed that the name of the person was Kang Woojin and he had registered as an awakened just today. That is why they could not find anything about him earlier. Leonie is shocked that someone who had recently awakened entered a dungeon alone and survived. In the 2-star dungeon where Woojin and Songu are under attack by Dasu and his people, the fight continues. Dasu is shocked when he notices that his attack had not reached Woojin. He had caught his hand even before he could stab him. Woojin says that for talking so big, his attack was quite useless. He punches Dasu and sends him flying. He then turns to the other people following Dasu and asks them if they were also involved in this conspiracy. The anxious look on their faces tells him what he wanted to know. He calls them shameless and greedy people who would resort to such cheap tactics to earn some money. He uses his magic and sacrifices the bodies of the goblins to summon more skeletons. He commands his skeletons and they kill everyone and Dasu is the last one left. He crawls backwards while begging Woojin to listen to him. But Woojin says that he would not wait for his skill cooldown so that he could attack him again. And with that, he kills the traitor. Songu is shocked that Woojin killed 5 people and yet he showed no symptoms of being troubled by his actions. Instead, he was checking out the loot on Dasu and is impressed that he was carrying a lot of money. He turns to Songu and tells him that there was no hope for people who stabbed others in the back, and he hated their guts. Songu is afraid and he agrees with everything Woojin says without thinking about it much. Woojin approaches him and says that since he had saved his life again, he would be doubling the price he had asked earlier. Now Songu had to give him 4 big ones. After that, he heals Songu when they come out of the dungeon. The person keeping records at the entrance asks them where were the remaining members of their party. And Woojin says that they were all killed by the monsters. But the man then says that if they all died, how did they still manage to mine all the bloodstones then? Woojin replies that in this world people had to earn money even if it killed them and the man is impressed by the deep thing he just said. But he asks Woojin and Songu to sign on a document and says that their help could be required in further investigations of this incident. Woojin is happy that he got 13 million won in just one trip to the dungeon. Add to that the 4 million Songu was supposed to give him. He now had 17 million won in his account. He needed to go back to the dungeons more often and he would go alone this time. But Songu is thinking about the money he had to give Woojin. Due to the fear and panic, he thinks that Woojin wanted 40 million instead of 4 million and he does not have that much money right now.